The Chicago Bulls suffer one of the most ugly fourth quarter collapses that I've maybe ever seen in my history of watching basketball. We'll talk about that, plus some of the positive in Zach LaVine and Coby White's play over the course of that game. All that and more on today's Locked On Bulls.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily Chicago Bulls podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every single day. I'm Hayes, host and creator of Chicago Bulls Central and Chicago Bears Central YouTube pages and podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Let's go ahead and get started on this one because this is about to be a absolute smoke show. The Chicago Bulls put together one of the most disgusting efforts I think you will ever see in the fourth quarter of a basketball game. Despite playing pretty well throughout most of that game, throughout the majority of that game, and leading throughout the majority of the game, the Chicago Bulls allowed the Atlanta Hawks to put up 50 points in the fourth quarter of this game. Now, I know some of my Bulls fans are going to look at the free throw discrepancy in that fourth quarter, and we'll get into that a little bit because the refs definitely, I'm not one to bet personally, but for those that bet, yeah, I think you'll see something that the refs were trying to do a little bit there. That's my personal opinion, but we're not going to go there. We're going to stay with integrity right now. But in the fourth quarter of this game, the Chicago Bulls put up 25 points while allowing the Atlanta Hawks to score 50 points. Now, the Atlanta Hawks did that on shooting 62% from the field in the fourth quarter of the game and 38% from three. And by the way, as well, in the fourth quarter of that game, the Atlanta Hawks had 17 free throws, which they made 15 of, while the Chicago Bulls had a total of 0 free throw attempts in the fourth quarter of that game. And that's just, it's bad overall. Like, the fourth quarter of this game was just one of those games where you started feeling it slip away. And you're just looking at it, you're watching it, and you're just like, wait a second. There's no wait, what? Wait a second. That's how bad it was. The Bulls had an 18-point lead at one point in the fourth quarter of this game, and they still came out to beat the Bulls by 8 points in this game. That's how bad it was. And the thing that concerns me the most about this fourth quarter collapse, it was how the team stopped trusting each other, how they stopped operating, everything that got the Bulls the lead, right? Solid defense. They didn't play great defense, but solid defense. Solid play as far as hitting open shots, everybody moving without the ball, those type of things. The Bulls just got completely away from it. And you felt as this game went on how it was slipping away from the Bulls, and the Bulls were just sitting there like, we don't know what to do. Bad shots started happening. Billy Donovan's coaching in the fourth quarter of this game was atrocious. In the fourth quarter of this game, you see your team bleeding, and you don't call a timeout to stop the bleeding at all. That's bad coaching. So you had bad player execution. You had bad, questionable officiating. You had bad coaching. There was so much in the fourth quarter of this game that went astray for the Chicago Bulls. It was almost like it was a story written for a movie. It didn't feel like real life to have this bad of a collapse, right? And we've seen the Bulls have collapses before, but either able to bounce back, things like that. This felt even worse than what it did at times against the team. Now, granted, the Bulls were missing Josh Giddey, Lonzo, Montes Bucilis, Ayo Dosunmu. All four of those players were missing for the Chicago Bulls, but it was more than just that. And despite Javon Carter, who you guys know, I've been a very harsh critic of Javon Carter. He had 19 points in the first half of this game, leading the team in scoring. And it just, like, you had a special performance from Javon Carter, mainly because Dalen Terry who started in place of Ayo Dosunmu, got himself in foul trouble. And Javon Carter came in and gave a performance. This was Javon Carter's second highest scoring game of his career. It was the highest scoring quarter of his career. That's what type of game this was for Javon Carter. Then you had Coby wake up, 23 points on 13 shots. Like, it was bad out there. And it just, unfortunately, man, yeah, it's really bad the way this team gave up that lead. And the Atlanta Hawks, like who we've this would have been our fourth win in a row, or did we win four? Maybe this would have been five, but a number of wins in a row in regular season, not even counting the play-in, but in the regular season against the Atlanta Hawks. And we got cooked. We got outcoached, outperformed, outclassed, worked by the referees. Everything that could go wrong in this game for the Bulls, it absolutely went wrong. And that's the problem when it comes down to this team. So it's and I see like football sea of candy, like, oh well, every win is actually letting the team down. No, like in this type of game, losing in this fashion let the team down, because not every fan is sitting there looking at it as, oh my God, we got to do everything to keep the pick. Now, granted, the Bulls, in the sense, like, they're competing to win. They failed at what they were trying to do. This Bulls team is trying to win basketball games. They failed at that. Now, the Bulls can absolutely still benefit from them losing. We've known that and said that before. We know what getting a top 10 pick in this draft can do for the team. But either way, the performance on the court last night was ugly. It was disgusting. It was no effort. And Billy Donovan is a huge part of that problem. Divine, we play horrible defense in the second half. I mean, yeah, but that's not a surprise. The Bulls are a horrible defensive team, right? Nothing new, just a different game, same old Bulls. That one's from Winton, absolutely. New coach coming soon. Brian, listen, if you have faith that this Bulls team is going to go with a new coach, I listen, pray up to you, bro. Pray up to you. Billy Donovan needs to go. Nothing will improve for the Bulls until he's out of here, regardless of who or who's not on the Bulls roster move. That's not completely true. If you have a good roster, you're going to improve. But this roster is extremely flawed. But that doesn't still mean that Billy Donovan doesn't need to go. Well, that game was rough. I'm still trying to process it. I went back and watched it because so the Bears game. That's why I didn't get this episode out last night. I went back and watched it. I had to do the Bears post game show for Bleacher Report. I went back last night and I watched the fourth quarter again because I was going to come back and still do this episode later. It would have been like midnight. But I watched that fourth quarter and I was so disgusted. I was like, I'm just going to talk about it in the morning. And then I watched part of it again today. So I had to watch the fourth quarter of this game 3 times. 3 times I watched the fourth quarter of this game. The ugliest fourth quarter ever. And then look, and then also, like, the Bulls shot 45% from the field. Not terrible. They shot 37% from 3. Not terrible either. Right? So it wasn't even the fact that the Bulls shot terribly. They couldn't defend anything. And then at some point, it was the turnovers as well. 5 turnovers in the fourth quarter of this game. 5 of them. 5 turnovers. That the Atlanta Hawks turned into 11 points off turnovers in just the fourth quarter. They had 20 points in the paint in just the fourth quarter of this game. This was an ugly and disgusting fourth quarter. Harvest Moon, it's over for this team. I have been supporting this team since my birth, but I can't take any more until this team gets a player that is a franchise player. Then maybe. Well, I mean, you could still win without having a franchise player. So to say, look at the Bulls before they got Derrick Rose. That team was winning a lot of games. They had one down season, which lucked them into getting Rose. But it just comes down to you. But to Harvest Moon's point, had you had a franchise player, right? Had you had a true number one, this is the type of game where you would want to see that player put the team on their back and just not be like, no, we're not losing this. Well, I refuse for us to lose this game. And we didn't have that in the fourth quarter of this game. And they had it. 16 points from Trae Young in the fourth quarter of this game. He goes 4 or 5 from the field, 6 free throws. You had Jalen Johnson go 4 or 5 from the field. He had 4 free throws. He made 3 of them for 11 points. That 27 points from those 2 players alone was more than the Chicago Bulls scored in the fourth quarter of this game. Trae Young and Jalen Johnson outscored the Bulls in the fourth quarter alone. The entirety of the Bulls team. It was one of the nastiest and most disgusting fourth quarter efforts you will ever see in basketball. I guarantee it. And unfortunately for the Bulls, they have given up now 4 of the highest scoring quarters in the game of basketball. The Bulls have given up 4 of those in this season. That's how bad it's been. The Bulls defense is god-awful. It's atrocious. It may be generationally bad. I talked about the Bulls having generational incompetence. This Bulls team may be generationally bad defensively because this was an ugly and disgusting effort from this Bulls team. And hopefully they learn from it. Hopefully they try to rebound and never want to feel this again. But then again, with Billy Donovan as the head coach, you just never know. Now, we're going to continue talking about this game. We did have some bright spots from Coby and LaVine, and I do want to spend some time talking about the performances that they had in this game, as well as Javon Carter a little bit. But first, we got to get to a message from Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on their IRA contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of the high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhoodgold.com. Terms do apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhoodgold.com. Investing does involve risk. Rate may change, and gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. More Locked on Bulls coming up next. All right, my Bulls fans. So, despite the ugly fourth quarter in this game, and believe you me, it was ugly, it was disgusting, it was frustrating, and it was heartbreaking to see the fourth quarter of this game. All jokes aside, it just was. There were some bright spots in this game, and I do want to acknowledge some Bulls performances in it. Even though we had an overall loss and a bad loss in this game by 8 points, I do want to acknowledge some things. First off, Zach LaVine was amazing, and especially in the third quarter of this game. He went 14 of 25 for 37 points, 7 assists, 3 rebounds, 1 steal, 1 block. He did have 7 turnovers, unfortunately, when it came down to this game overall. But the third quarter specifically for Zach LaVine in this game, the third quarter was masterful. This may be one of Zach LaVine's best quarters of basketball he's ever played. He scored 22 points in the third quarter of this game, going 7 of 9 from the field, 6 of 6 from three-point range. He had 4 assists, 2 rebounds, 1 steal. And when you watch the third quarter of this game and Zach got into that rhythm, you really started feeling like, all right, the Bulls are about to put this away, and they're doing so via the performance of Zach LaVine, showing once again, hey, he's playing at an all-star caliber level. It felt so good watching. Now, of course, it all came crashing down, but it felt really good watching Zach LaVine have this type of performance. And that rhythm that he got into in that third quarter, you started seeing Zach LaVine. He was looking towards the Hawks bench. He was talking shit. He was doing all that type of thing. And it was good. It's good to see when Zach's having fun playing basketball and locked in, because I've said it many times before. As many flaws as Zach LaVine has, because he does have flaws, when he's locked in a scoring rhythm, there's very few players that are as nasty as Zach LaVine when he's in that scoring flow and rhythm. And it's really special to see, because it just builds up and it keeps going and going, and you start seeing that rhythm. And once he starts feeling it, he starts hitting those 3-point shots from Steph Curry range. Like, it's really good to see Zach LaVine get in that type of flow, because it's special. And we don't get to see it as much as what we did earlier. And even then, when we saw earlier in his career with the Bulls weren't really winning anything. So, and they didn't win this game either. So it was really good to see that, right? It was really good to see that performance from Zach LaVine. And I think that, with Zach and the way that he can lock in, that's why teams look at Zach. And you hear some teams like Denver or whatever could be interested in bringing in Zach, because I maintain this. As much as people have crapped on Zach over the last few years, when Zach LaVine is on, he's on. And if you have Zach LaVine as your third best player, you're a championship contender. If he's your second best player, depending on what other players are around his level, you could still be a champ. Like, the problem that is not necessarily Zach. Like, Zach has issues. He's not a perfect player. But the fact that this team has never been able to put a team around Zach to really take advantage of the special scorer that Zach LaVine is, it gets made more and more evident when you have games like this. So shout out to Zach for that performance. He had a really good performance in that. We got this one. Zach is an all-star this season, his most efficient season ever. He is cooking. He's definitely and that's probably what also plays into teams realizing, hey, no, this kid Zach can actually fit really well into a system if we have one, because Zach is on. Like, him taking less shots and having to refine his game, being more choosy with his shots, you're seeing a really good version of Zach LaVine. Really good version of Zach LaVine. As long as Vooch is on the floor, the defense will be bad. All the switching to protect Vooch, switching on a point guard. So trickle. No, that's not just because Vooch. We've had a top 5 defense with Vooch on the team. The problem isn't just Vooch switching. The problem is we have no point of attack defense. Our perimeter, see, where we got away with it before is because we had really good perimeter defense. Our perimeter defense is trash. It's absolutely god awful. And that's one of the things of having Coby White and Zach LaVine out there together. You're not going to have really good perimeter defense. The biggest problem with our defense, because Vooch is actually a good on-ball defender for power forwards and for centers. He is bad when switching because he can only play drop coverage. But then when you have bad pick and roll defenders and you also have bad perimeter defense, it puts you in a net negative. But with that said, another player had a really good game today, last night, I should say, and that's Coby White. 8 of 13 from the field. 23 points that he had in this game. 23 on 13 shots is really good. 9 assists, 3 rebounds, 1 steal, 3 turnovers from him, but that was less, especially considering how much ball handling he did do. And the way that Coby White got into rhythm in this game is he started attacking the paint. He started shooting in the mid-range. That's one thing that we've talked about. The one downside of this new system that we've had, it's forced Coby White to basically just be a 3-point shooter. 63% of Coby White's shots this season come from through the 3-point line. And that's just not how Coby has ever been solid as a scorer before. He's a rhythm scorer, and to get in rhythm, he needs to finish around the rim. He has to get into the mid-range. And that's one thing that Coby White did early in this game. He started attacking. It started off slow and rocky for Coby White, but he started building momentum and getting into that rhythm that was important for that team. And it ended up paying off for Coby. And I'm not gonna say right now that this is all of a sudden gonna be some wake up call for Coby White and he's gonna play much better. I want to see it in a few more games before I say that, but it's good to see Coby White shake it off. He was 0 for 2 in the first quarter of this game. He then went 2 for 2 in the second quarter of this game. In the third quarter, he went 3 of 5, right? 3, and all of that being from the 3-point line. And then in the fourth quarter of this game, 3 of 4 overall from the field, 1 of 1 from the 3-point line. So it steadily got better for Coby as the game went on. And, that was a really big part of Coby White's game and how he was able to positively, impact things for this Bulls team. And like I said before, it's just really good to see Coby White have a solid game, right? Because this is something for scores, sometimes you just need that one game. And in that one game, maybe it wakes you up. And Coby has been in a slump that's lasted about 15 to 18 games so far. So over half the games this season. So hopefully this could be that wake-up call we'll see for Coby. But there's one player today that just had that nobody expected this performance from him. I talked about it a little bit earlier. Javon Carter got into this game mainly because of the injuries, and Dalen Terry got into some early foul trouble. He ends up playing 36 minutes in this game. He goes 9 of 15 from the field, 7 of 11 from 3-point range for 26 points, 5 assists, 4 rebounds, 1 steal. Javon Carter played a really good game, and it's crazy to see that continue to how that happened as far as Javon Carter, just having this type of game when he's been so bad for the Bulls and not really played a lot. Javon Carter wasn't even expected to really be into the rotation. Stacey King had a great call out during the game, and he said, well, I wonder if Javon Carter was even on the Hawks scouting report because the Hawks were leaving him wide open. And that's not a knock on Javon Carter. Hitting wide open shots is still a skill. I know it's something that we looked at should easily be done, but it is still a skill, and not everybody's able to do it. Javon Carter hit his open shots today. And it was more than that. As the rhythm built on, you started seeing him go to the rim, things like that. And so Javon Carter had the type of game that the Bulls would not have been in this game. Yeah, and that's a funny thing to think about, right? Is that if Dalen Terry did not get into that early foul trouble and we don't see Javon Carter as early in the game as what we did, would this have been a blowout? Would the Bulls have gotten blown out here? Because keep in mind, the Bulls had a lead at halftime mainly because of Javon Carter. Zach LaVine didn't wake up until the third quarter, really, right? So it's just an interesting thing to have that conversation on how much of it was on the fact that Dalen Terry got in foul trouble and Javon Carter was able to come in and be on an absolute heater to start off this game. And it helped keep the Bulls in the game. And then, like I said, Zach LaVine was basically the reason for it in the third quarter. It's just really interesting to watch all that, man, and how that goes. The woulda, coulda, shouldas, the what ifs is always fun to talk about in basketball. It's not on Zach and Vooch and the breakdown defense. It's not on Zach in the break. What? Just a question, Hayes. Who do you want the Bulls to draft if we got the third pick on this upcoming class, a player that you build around? Who is that player for you? Oh, I mean, there's a lot of them. I like Harper a lot. I like him a lot. Yeah, I mean, if it's third overall, it really, whoever falls out the top two is really what you look at it. Now, if you're talking about top 10, like a player that I like a lot in this draft that isn't being talked about enough is Asa Newell. I love Asa Newell in this draft. Hot take, Bulls fans may be ready for the Bulls to draft another guard with the way the guy from Illinois is playing. Dylan Harper is playing lights out in Rutgers, the best talent. They're not going to be high enough to draft Dylan Harper. That's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. That fourth Hayes Vooch effort was gone. The frustration set in and layup after layup, switching off facts about Carter. Yeah, I mean, listen, the whole team defensively was trash in the fourth quarter. They collectively lost any mojo that they had. It's not just on Vooch in the fourth quarter. The whole entire team fell apart in the fourth quarter of that game, at least in my opinion. But all right, y'all, we're going to go ahead and get into a break. Last break of the day. We're going to get into a message from FanDuel. All right. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to join in on the excitement of the regular season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a chance to finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's right. Just bet $5, and if you win, you're walking away with $250,000 in bonus bets to play with. I love using FanDuel because they make betting so much fun. From picking which players will score touchdowns to guessing the totals on team points, there's always a way to add some thrill to the game. Whether if it's the big plays or the small moments, FanDuel has you covered. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com, where you can get started with $250 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. More Locked On Bulls coming up next. All right, Bulls fans. So with all that said, man, the Bulls continue to fail, right? And I know there's a lot of Bulls fans. We got one in the building in CF Football Candy that says things like, well, the Bulls failing is actually good because it means that we can keep our top 10 pick. We're going to be able to add a talent, hopefully, that we need, right, to help kind of raise the ceiling and the bar of this team, to get up some more talent that's much needed on this team. And there's a lot of validity in that, right? I want to make it clear there's a lot of validity in that. But the fact of the matter is that the Bulls keep setting goals that they don't hit. And I know that a front office is never going to come out and say, well, you know what, we're valuing keeping the pick above and anything else, right? Especially in a situation like this where it's top 10 protected, which means that keeping your pick would come down to you being a bad team, right? I understand that. It's valid, smart. But with the place that this team is in and the fact that you keep finding new ways to disappoint your fan base. You keep finding new ways to drop games. You keep finding new ways to fail your players, right? That's overall, and that's where I've said it before. I think I've said it more so on Chicago Bulls Central, but it still maintains true, is that the problem that I have with this front office and this team isn't necessarily just the losing, right? It's the fact that everything this front office does, that this team does, it really doesn't make any sense for any type of grand scheme or plan. Coby White had one of the biggest and most revelating seasons that we've seen in the Chicago Bulls uniform in a while. You then reward that by bringing in a point guard and completely changing his role. Right? You've made him now more of a jump shooter where he was a rhythm shooter, right? You bring in Josh Giddey, which cool. Okay, cool. If that was the best deal at that time you could have gotten for Alex Caruso, cool, whatever it is. But then when you bring in and you look at the way that the Bulls have maneuvered this roster, every bit of the players that we bring in don't actually help with anything that, and one could say, well, hey, Josh Giddey isn't the type of talent where you really want to change your roster construction just to make, to maximize on his skill set. Okay, cool. Whatever, right? You have these veteran players in Nikola Vucevic and Zach LaVine that are here, right? That are giving you some of the best seasons they've given you a while in a Bulls uniform. And you're not in a place to really add anything. And that's the thing that also, like, all right, cool. Let's say you don't want to keep the first round pick, whatever. You're not in the place. You don't have the assets. You don't have the cap space. You don't have the anything to go out and add players to this team that are really going to help this team get further along in that journey either. And that's where the conundrum comes in at, and why this team is such an enigma. Every possible thing that they can point towards doing, they fell at. They fell at. It has not stopped this. That's the biggest thing. I'm not even talking about whether you fail or exceed in fans' goals. Nothing that you've set out to do, you've done. You came in here and said you wanted to build organically through the draft and develop. You haven't done that. You're starting to do that now with Peter Patton. Thank God, prayers up to Peter Patton, right? You then build a team that says that you want to go and win now. You don't do that well because of injuries and other things. You didn't do that well. What I asked, and this is the question that I'm going to end this week on. This is the last episode of the week. I'm going to end it on this one. What has this front office done well? And that's a huge question. Outside of Billy Donovan, I know, we got Winton in here. He's going to talk about Billy Donovan. But the question is, what has this front office done well? Drafting Ayo Dosunmu is probably one of the best things that they've done. Best value picks that they've gotten. And Modest Busilis is a rookie. The only reason I'm not putting him there, he has a chance to more than exceed that. But what has this team done well? What is this front office in the way that they've constructed this team or set up things for the future or even moved off of players? What have they done well? And that's where my biggest fear comes in at with this team going forward. They've done nothing well. So any goal that they set, any path that it looks like they're going to go down, I still have to look at and question, all right, but how well are they going to be able to do it? Because what have they done well? I don't know what else to say. You guys can let me know how you feel down below. As always, make sure you guys are following the channel at Locked On Bulls. You can follow me personally at CEO Hayes. Locked On Bulls is free and available on every podcasting app and platform of your choice, as well as YouTube. Like I liked and everything on. Go Bulls. Love you guys. See red, y'all. Peace.